The words weren't aimed kindly. They cut through the chatter of the air show like a blade. Sarah Mitchell didn't answer. She just stood in the crowd, plain gray hoodie tugged around her shoulders, her dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked like nobody, and that was the point. She had built her life carefully that way, quiet, invisible, ordinary. For 12 years she had lived in silence, teaching yoga in a small coastal town, sweeping the studio floor herself at the end of each night, and driving home to the same modest apartment. Not one person in her new life had ever known the truth. Not one had asked. But the sky knew. The roar of engines thundered above, slicing clouds into ribbons. Families cheered, kids jumped and pointed, cameras snapped in bursts. Sarah didn't cheer. She just watched, her eyes locked on the sleek gray Predator cutting loops against the horizon, the F-22 Raptor. She had flown one once. No one around her could have guessed. They saw only a woman in faded jeans and sneakers, someone who didn't look like she belonged at all. The crowd pressed tighter, their bodies electric with excitement, but Sarah stayed at the edge, her weight shifting slowly on the gravel beneath her feet. She liked shadows. She liked silence. Still, her fingers wouldn't let go of the small keychain in her pocket, a tiny metal jet, scuffed at the edges, heavy with memory. She hadn't touched it this much in years. Today, though, she couldn't stop. A vendor's voice rang out behind her, sharp and mocking. "Hey lady, you lost. This ain't a yoga retreat." A ripple of laughter followed. Sarah didn't turn. She didn't need to. She'd heard that tone 1,000 times. Mocking, dismissive, certain. She only shifted her grip on the keychain until its edges bit into her palm. The sky cracked again, engines roaring. The F-22 banked hard, sunlight flaring off its wings. For a moment, Sarah's breath hitched. The movements were sloppy, not dangerous yet, but not what they should be. She noticed what others didn't. Every twitch of the control surfaces, every fraction of delay in the roll. Instincts long buried rose fast and sharp. Her jaw tightened. She told herself to look away. But she didn't. Near her, a girl no older than 10 tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why is she here all alone? She doesn't even look like she likes planes." Sarah's lips pressed together. The father barely looked at her before muttering, "Probably just lost, kiddo. Doesn't know what's going on." Sarah turned her face toward the sky again. She had promised herself she would never react, never argue, never correct anyone's assumptions. That was the deal she'd made with herself when she walked away from the Navy. Keep quiet. Stay hidden. Let them think what they want. Then the sound came. A crack, a wrongness, a scream of metal high above. The crowd gasped as the F-22 wobbled, one engine coughing smoke. The plane tilted unnaturally, fighting its own weight. Over the loudspeakers, static exploded, followed by a young, panicked voice. "Mayday, mayday, lost control, this is." The words fractured into static, but the message was clear. Sarah's entire body went still. Around her, chaos erupted. People shouted, mothers pulled their children close, some ducked like the falling jet might already be on top of them. A man in a baseball cap shouted, "It's going to crash." Sarah's hand clamped hard around her keychain. She could feel the scar tissue of old calluses burn awake against her palm. The Raptor spiraled lower, black smoke trailing across the perfect blue. For 12 years, she had stayed silent. For 12 years, she had trained her heart not to race, her mind not to calculate angles and speeds. But the body remembers what the mind tries to bury. Her throat dried. Her legs trembled. She wanted to turn, to walk away, to let the past remain buried. But her eyes stayed on the sky. Near the barriers, a group of young men stood laughing, their sunglasses mirrored, their arms crossed like they owned the place. One of them pointed directly at her. "Yo, what's she staring at? Think she's gonna fix that jet with her yoga moves?" The others roared, tossing their empty soda cans in a pile. Another leaned forward, gold chain glinting in the sun. "Bet she doesn't even know what an F-22 is. Look at her. probably here for the food trucks. The sting landed sharper than they knew, but Sarah's face remained steady. She had learned long ago how to hide the cut of words. She stepped closer to the barrier instead, her eyes fixed on the smoking jet. A volunteer in a neon vest intercepted her with a tight smile and a clipboard. "Excuse me, ma'am, this area's for VIPs and staff only. You're not on the list, are you?" The tone was sugar over steel, dismissal wrapped in politeness. Sarah's voice was low, almost a whisper but firm. "I'm where I need to be." The volunteer blinked, unsettled, and stepped aside. Not everyone dismissed her. A retired pilot in a weathered Navy cap had been watching her for a while, his brows drawn low. He leaned toward a friend, his voice gravel. "Heard she tried Top Gun once, couldn't hack it, dropped out. Shame, really." His friend nodded, not bothering to lower his voice. "Figures, she doesn't look like she belongs here." The words dug deep, deeper than they should have. Sarah's shoulders squared just a fraction and her jaw set. She had belonged once, more than they would ever know. The jet above groaned, its trail of smoke thickening. Sirens wailed across the tarmac. A commanding officer stormed out of the control tower, red-faced, his voice booming. "Is there anyone here skilled enough to fly a Raptor?" The crowd froze, nobody stepped forward, nobody spoke. Sarah's chest rose and fell once hard. Something shifted inside her. The softness in her eyes vanished, replaced by steel. She stepped over the barrier in one smooth motion, her sneakers hitting asphalt with a sound that cut through the crowd's panic. People parted instinctively. Some sneered, some whispered, some laughed under their breath, but they moved aside. A local reporter spotted her immediately. She nudged her cameraman, microphone clutched tight. "Get this, some nobody thinks she's going to play hero. Zoom in." The lens captured every detail. Her hoodie, her scuffed sneakers, the calm determination on her face. The reporter's tone was mocking, syrup-thick. "Looks like we've got a wannabe pilot here, folks. Probably doesn't even know the cockpit from the cargo hold." Phones raised, the crowd chuckled. Sarah didn't break stride. She pushed the control room door open, without hesitation. Inside, tension was a living thing. Radios crackled. Screens bled red alerts. Officers barked at one another, their words colliding in the air. The moment Sarah stepped inside, silence hit. A major sharp uniform and sharper ego sneered openly. "Don't tell me she's volunteering. She's past her time. Look at her. Out of the game for years." Another, younger officer, voice slick with ambition, piled on. 12 years away from the stick. She can't fly a paper plane, let alone a Raptor." Murmurs rippled through the room, each word a dismissal. Sarah didn't flinch. She walked straight to the commander's desk. Without a word, she pulled a small, worn leather case from her pocket, flipped it open, and set it down. The badge inside gleamed under fluorescent light. Top Gun Instructor. The name, Sarah Mitchell. Silence fell harder. The commander himself stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he read. His voice dropped, almost reverent. "God, you're Mitchell, the one who downed 7 targets in training." Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady. "There's no time. Open the hangar." The room shifted, doubts froze. The major's lip curled, but no words came. The younger officer stepped back, his smirk gone. For the first time in 12 years, the silence broke. Sarah walked toward the hangar, her steps unhurried, her spine straight. Whispers trailed behind her. Doubt still clung to the air, but something else lingered now, fear, awe, the faint spark of recognition. The past she had buried was no longer hers alone. And above them all, the crippled jet screamed toward Earth, its young pilot's voice crackling through static. "I can't hold it, it's going down." Sarah tightened her grip on the memory-worn keychain in her pocket. Not this time. Not again. Why was she still walking toward the hangar? That was the question on everyone's face. A woman in a hoodie, sneakers crunching against asphalt, carrying nothing but a weathered badge and a past she'd refused to speak of. The air show had become something else entirely now, no longer entertainment but a crisis. The crowd wasn't clapping anymore. They were hushed, restless eyes following the thin figure striding past barriers and soldiers. Some scoffed under their breath, clinging to disbelief like it was safer than hope. Others simply stared, as if trying to place a memory they didn't even know they had. And above them, the crippled F-22 kept bleeding black smoke across the summer sky. Inside the hangar, the noise was deafening. Hydraulic lifts hissed, tools clattered, technicians barked orders over the roar of engines being tested and retested. Every step Sarah took seemed to sharpen the tension. She didn't walk fast, but she didn't hesitate. One technician, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, sneered as she passed. "Next-gen bird. She won't keep up, no way." Another older muttered without looking up, "12 years gone, reflexes fossilized." The words landed like stones tossed at her back, but Sarah didn't slow. She moved like someone who had walked this path before, someone who had lived in this noise, who had called this hangar home once upon a time. She stopped at the ladder leading up to the cockpit of the backup Raptor. A soldier barely old enough to shave stood guard, his jaw tight. He had the look of someone desperate to say what he shouldn't, and when his voice came, it was sharp. "If she fails, that kid dies with her." For a moment the air in the hangar thickened. No one corrected him, no one reassured. The truth was too raw. Sarah's hand found the rung of the ladder. She climbed without a word, her body moving with a practiced grace that silenced some of the whispers. She slid into the seat, fingers brushing across controls she hadn't touched in over a decade. The canopy closed above her. Alone, finally, she let her eyes fall shut for one slow breath. The radio crackled in her helmet. A young voice panicked, broken. "I can't hold it, it's going down." Sarah's eyes opened again, clear and hard. "Listen to me," she said, her voice calm, the kind of calm that cuts through fire. "Follow every move. I'll get you home." There was a pause on the other end, then a shaky, "Yes, ma'am." On the ground, the crowd buzzed with disbelief. A security guard near the barrier shook his head, muttering to another, "She's got no business up there. Rusty as hell. Kid's done for." The words spread like sparks through dry grass. Doubt, fear, dismissal. It was easier to believe in failure than risk the hope she might succeed. But Sarah wasn't listening to them. Her hand rested on the throttle. Her eyes, through the canopy, locked on the wounded jet above. "Tower," she said evenly, "clear runway for launch." The commander's voice answered, steady but taut. "Runway is yours. Godspeed, Mitchell." Her grip tightened. The engines roared awake. The vibration filled her chest, shook through her bones. It wasn't nostalgia, it was something older, deeper. Like stepping into a version of herself she thought she'd buried for good. The Raptor surged forward, air peeled away, the ground vanished beneath her. For the first time in 12 years, Sarah Mitchell was airborne. The sky greeted her like an old adversary, bright, endless, indifferent. She leveled off, cutting through thin clouds, her eyes fixed on the dark smoke trail ahead. The crippled F-22 twisted like a wounded bird, lurching dangerously each time its pilot tried to correct. Flames licked along its side, threatening to consume what control remained. Sarah eased her jet closer, the HUD painting bright red warnings across her vision. "Stay with me," she told the young pilot. "Match my climb." Static hissed, then his voice came, jagged with fear. I can't, controls are." "You can," she cut in. Her tone left no space for argument. "You will, eyes on my tail, nothing else." For a second, silence. Then his ragged breath, followed by the faintest correction on his wing. The jet wobbled, but it held. Sarah mirrored his move perfectly, closing the gap until she was nearly wing to wing. Below, thousands of faces tilted skyward. Doubt gave way to awe in ripples. Phones that had been raised to record mockery now captured something else entirely. A dance of steel against the sky, choreographed by a woman they had written off moments earlier. In the control tower, the major who had sneered at her earlier stood stiff, arms crossed, trying not to show the sweat breaking at his temple. The younger officer beside him muttered, "She's actually doing it." The retired pilot in the crowd shoved forward, his beer forgotten. His voice shook. "That's her, that's Valkyrie." The name spread like a rumor, finally confirmed. Sarah's call sign. Valkyrie. Warning alarms screamed inside her cockpit, painting every corner of the HUD with red. She tuned them out. Alarms told you what you already knew. What mattered was the feel, the way the jet responded, the way its body spoke through the stick. That was something a computer couldn't teach, couldn't replace. The young pilot's voice cracked again. "It's burning bad, I can't." "You can," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Pull left now." The crippled jet lurched hard. For a heartbeat, it seemed certain to spin into fire. But Sarah was already there, shadowing the move, stabilizing with her own turbulence. Their wings nearly touched. From the ground, the two raptors looked welded together, one carrying the other by sheer will. A hush spread across the crowd. Even those who had mocked her fell silent. The medic team near the runway clenched their jaws, watching. One whispered, "If she pulls this off, I'll eat my kit." The other shook her head, unable to answer, eyes wide. Sarah's voice stayed calm, but inside her chest burned. The strain was immense, not on her body but on memory. Every instinct she had locked away for years had come flooding back all at once, demanding control. Her hands shook, not with fear but with the weight of it. She forced herself to breathe, steady, even, focus only on the young pilots breathing over the radio. "You're not alone," she said quietly. For a moment silence, then "Copy." His voice steadied just slightly. They began their descent. The runway stretched ahead, a strip of salvation against the chaos of the crowd. Fire still spit from the wounded jet, but it was holding. "Ease back," Sarah ordered. "Let me take the lead." He obeyed. His jet wobbled, but it followed. Her hands moved like they had never left the controls, every motion clean, decisive, mercilessly precise. On the ground, the commander leaned forward against the console, eyes locked on the screens. He muttered under his breath, almost a prayer. The jets touched down. Her backup Raptor first, smooth, perfect. Tires screeched, smoke curled. Then his crippled jet slammed down behind, sparks flying, flames licking the fuselage. Emergency crews surged forward, foam cannons ready. Both jets skidded to a halt. Silence held for a heartbeat, two. Then the crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, shouts, chaotic and deafening. But Sarah didn't hear them. Her breath came hard, her hands stiff as she unstrapped. She climbed down from the cockpit, her knees nearly buckling against the asphalt. The keychain in her pocket felt like molten steel. The young pilot stumbled out of his jet, pale and shaking. His eyes locked on her, wide with something close to reverence. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked into nothing. She gave him one firm nod, no more. Behind them, the roar of the crowd rose again. But within it, threads of doubt still lingered, whispers about luck, about timing, about whether it had really been her skill at all. A photographer lowered his camera, muttering to a colleague, "She got lucky. No way she's the real deal." The words drifted across the tarmac, sharp, dismissive. Sarah didn't turn. She didn't need to. She walked past the crowd, steady, silent, her eyes on the horizon. The battle wasn't over. The sky had only just begun to remember her name. Why did the cheers sound so far away? That was Sarah's first thought as she pushed past the crowd. Their voices rose in waves, applause, whistles, even shouts of her name. But it all sounded distant, muffled, like she was walking underwater. Her steps were steady, but her chest ached. The adrenaline that had carried her through the sky now drained like blood from an open wound. Every breath felt heavier, slower. She tightened her hand around the keychain in her pocket, grounding herself with the cold bite of metal. She didn't stop walking, she couldn't. Eyes followed her, hundreds of them, some brimming with awe, others with shame. The same mouths that had mocked her minutes earlier now fell silent as she passed. No one dared speak now, not to her face. But the whispers behind her were still sharp, still doubtful. She got lucky. Anyone could have pulled that off. Timing, that's all it was. The words floated above the cheers like smoke that refused to clear. Sarah ignored them. At least she thought she did. But her pulse was uneven, her vision blurring at the edges. She took another step, then another, until the ground shifted beneath her. Her knees buckled. The world tilted. She hit the asphalt hard, the sting in her palms barely registering before darkness pressed in. Voices shouted, urgent now, frantic. Medics rushed forward, their boots pounding against concrete. Get her on the stretcher. She's out, move, move. Hands lifted her, strapped her down, carried her through a blur of faces she didn't recognize. Some were pale with worry, others still twisted with disbelief, and a few finally carried the look of recognition. Recognition of a legend they had buried alive. Light. That was the next thing she knew. Not the burning light of the sky, but the soft, filtered glow of morning. It streamed through a narrow barracks window, painting the white wall in pale gold. A fan hummed faintly overhead, stirring the silence. Sarah's eyes opened slowly. Her body felt heavy, weighted with exhaustion. She turned her head and saw the keychain on a small table beside the cot. Someone had placed it there carefully, almost reverently. For a long moment she just stared at it. The tiny metal jet, dulled from years of wear, had never felt heavier. The door creaked. She looked up. The commander stepped inside. His uniform was pressed, his stride firm but his face softer than before. Behind him, the hallway was lined with pilots and Marines, their bodies rigid, their eyes fixed on her door as if waiting for a signal. Sarah sat up slowly, ignoring the ache in her muscles. She pulled her shoulders back, spine straight. The commander stopped a few feet from her cot. For a moment, he simply studied her, the woman who had just done what none of his men could. Finally, his voice came, low but carrying. "Captain Mitchell," he said, the name hit the air like a stone in still water. "You saved that boy's life. You saved that jet." He paused, his gaze steady. "You're still one of us." The words lodged in Sarah's chest, sharp and unexpected. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket. Still one of us. 12 years gone, 12 years hiding, 12 years convincing herself she was. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to nod, though her eyes burned. Behind the commander, a young Marine stepped into view. His uniform looked too new, his salute too rigid. Sarah recognized him. He had been one of the loudest doubters in the hangar, the one who said her reflexes were fossilized. Now his hands shook as he held his salute. His voice was quiet but clear. "Ma'am," he said, "I was wrong, I'm sorry." His eyes met hers for only a second before dropping to the floor. Sarah studied him, her face unreadable. Then she gave the smallest nod, nothing more. The Marine's cheeks burned, but his salute didn't waver. The commander glanced back at the hallway. "You should see this," he said. He stepped aside. Sarah rose slowly, every muscle protesting, but her back stayed straight. She followed him to the door. And then she saw them. 500 men and women, pilots and ground crew alike, lined in perfect rows outside the barracks. Uniforms crisp, faces solemn. As one, they saluted. The sound of their movement, the sharp snap of hands to brows, cut through the air like a blade. Sarah's throat constricted. She stood in the doorway, silent, still. Her eyes scanned the formation. She recognized faces. The technician who'd muttered about her fossilized reflexes, the soldier who'd warned she'd fail, the guard who'd sworn the kid was done for, all of them, their salutes steady now. She didn't smile, she didn't wave. She just stood there, her presence answer enough. The respect wasn't in their words, it was in the silence, in the collective weight of the moment. And in that silence, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not victory, not vindication, something quieter, something heavier. Belonging. Not everyone welcomed it. Later that day, word spread through the base. The major who had sneered at her in the control room had been relieved of duty, his reckless judgment costing him his career. The younger officer who mocked her paper-plane skills faced formal review, his promotion frozen indefinitely. But others paid in different ways. The woman in the sundress, the one who had mocked Sarah with pity, had her words caught on dozens of cell phone recordings. By evening, the clip went viral. Sponsors cut ties. Followers turned against her. The group of young men in sunglasses tried to laugh it off, but their group chats told the truth. None of them let the tall one forget his big mouth. His confidence curdled into shame. And yet none of it mattered to Sarah. She didn't watch the fallout. She didn't need to. Because the truth wasn't about them anymore. The truth was that she had flown again. That night the barracks were quiet. The sun had set, leaving the world painted in gray-blue. Sarah sat alone on the edge of her cot, her elbows on her knees, the keychain turning slowly in her fingers. She thought about the young pilot's voice, panicked and breaking. She thought about the silence when she landed. She thought about 12 years of invisibility, shattered in one day. And she wondered, had she done enough? The doubts returned easily like shadows at dusk. Maybe it had been luck. Maybe the jet had saved itself. Maybe the world only saw what it wanted to see. But then she remembered the boy's eyes, wide and unsteady, when he looked at her on the runway. That wasn't luck. That was survival. Her chest rose slowly, her breath catching on a thought she couldn't quite speak aloud. For 12 years she had been a ghost. Today, the sky had pulled her back. But what now? She didn't know. For the first time in a long time, she didn't need to. She slipped the keychain back into her pocket and lay down, her eyes closing against the hum of the barracks fan. Sleep didn't come easily. Memories stirred too loudly. But for once, they weren't only regrets. They were possibilities. Outside, the runway slept. The jets were silent, the crowd long gone, but the air still held the weight of what had happened. The coastal breeze carried it across the empty tarmac, through the darkened hangars, and up into the endless night sky. The sky had always known her name. Now so did they. Why couldn't she slip back into silence? That was the question Sarah asked herself the next morning. She woke not to the hum of the fan or the soft glow of sunlight, but to the sound of voices outside her barracks door. Reporters. They had come early, long before the base gates usually opened to civilians. Somehow, word had spread, faster than wildfire, faster than she could have imagined. Someone had leaked her name. Maybe the commander, maybe a pilot, maybe just someone in the crowd with a phone and a fast internet connection. It didn't matter how, the result was the same. Her secret was gone. She sat on the cot, her hoodie folded neatly at her side, the keychain resting on her palm. She rolled it slowly, the metal edges biting into her skin. The weight of 12 years of silence pressed down harder than ever. A knock rattled the door. She didn't answer. The commander stepped in without waiting, his expression grim but respectful. "Mitchell," he said. He rarely used her first name. "There's press at the gates. They know who you are. They know what you did yesterday." Sarah closed her hand around the keychain, her eyes on the floor. "I didn't do it for them." "I know," he said softly, "but they'll never see it that way." She looked up finally, her eyes narrowing. "Then what do I do?" He studied her for a long moment before answering. "That depends. Do you want to disappear again, or do you want to own it? The choice cut deep. The base didn't wait for her answer. By midday, the footage was everywhere. Clips of the crippled jet spiraling, clips of Sarah climbing into the cockpit, clips of two Raptors flying wing to wing, smoke trailing, flames licking the horizon. And then the landing, perfect, unbelievable. The internet did what it always did, turning the moment into a storm of headlines, hashtags, and arguments. Some called her a hero. Some called her reckless. Some doubted it was even real. But none of them ignored her anymore. For the first time in 12 years, Sarah Mitchell wasn't invisible. On base, the mood shifted. The young pilot she had saved, his name was Carter, though no one had dared ask her if she knew, sat in recovery, his burns being treated, his lungs still heavy with smoke. But he refused rest until he'd spoken to her. When she finally agreed to visit, he sat up straighter than his injuries allowed, his face pale but his eyes burning. You saved my life," he said, his voice raw. Sarah shook her head. "You saved your own, I just reminded you how." His lips trembled, a protest on his tongue, but he swallowed it. Instead, he just looked at her like she was something more than human. She hated it. Not because of him, but because of the weight it carried. Hero, legend, Valkyrie. All the words she had tried to bury. That night the commander called her into his office. His desk was littered with files, reports, even a few photographs already printed from news coverage. He gestured for her to sit. "They'll want you back," he said simply. Her body tensed. "No. You don't understand." His voice hardened. "They'll push, they'll ask, they'll pull every string they have to drag you into this again." Sarah leaned forward, her voice sharp. "I walked away for a reason." "I know," he said quietly, "but maybe the reason you're here now is bigger than the reason you left." She stared at him, her jaw tight, her hands gripping her knees. She wanted to argue. She wanted to slam the door and walk out into the night, vanish into her quiet life again. But part of her knew he was right. Something had pulled her back. And it wasn't just the SOS in the sky. Outside, the whispers grew. Some soldiers admired her, saluted her when they passed, but others still sneered quietly, bitterness clinging to their voices. "She thinks she's better than us. She only flew because she wanted the attention. She'll crumble if they put her on a real mission." Sarah heard them, every word. She pretended not to, but the words lodged inside like splinters. She told herself they didn't matter. But late at night, when the barracks were quiet and the keychain pressed against her palm, she wondered if they were right. 12 years. Could skill survive 12 years? Could instinct really last that long? Or had she just been lucky, one final miracle before time caught up with her? 2 days later, she got her answer. The commander called her to the hangar. She walked in to find the young pilot, Carter, standing stiff and pale beside a Raptor simulator. His bandages were fresh, but his jaw was set. "You're going to train him," the commander said. Sarah froze. "What?" "He trusts you. He listens to you. He'll learn from you faster than anyone else." Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stared at Carter, the boy she had dragged from the edge of death in the sky. His eyes were fixed on her, not with arrogance, not with mockery, but with something heavier: dependence. She wanted to say no. She wanted to walk away again. But Carter's voice came first, low and rough. "I can't do this without you." The words landed harder than any order. Her throat closed. She swallowed against it, her voice barely steady. "Then you'll learn, but not because of me, because of you." Carter nodded once, his expression set. And Sarah realized there would be no walking away this time. The days blurred. The simulator room became their battleground. Carter strapped in, sweat running down his temples, panic still in his breathing. Sarah stood outside, headset on, her voice calm, clipped, mercilessly precise. Again, reset. You pull too late again. He cursed under his breath. He slammed the throttle too hard. He jerked the stick when finesse was needed, but he tried, again and again. And every time he faltered, Sarah's voice cut through like steel. You think panic will save you. You think fear will carry you through fire. It won't, again. He hated her for it. She could see it in his eyes when he stumbled out of the simulator, drenched in sweat, fists clenched. But he kept coming back. And with each day, his movements sharpened. His corrections grew cleaner, his breathing steadier. And with each day, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years: purpose. Still, the past lingered. Some nights when Carter finally left the simulator room, Sarah stayed behind alone. She would slide into the seat herself, hands trembling slightly as they touched the controls. The screens lit her face. The stick fit her palm like it had never left. And for a few minutes she flew again, not in the sky but in memory. Sometimes her chest tightened so badly she had to stop. Sometimes she whispered names no one else could hear. Names of those who hadn't made it back. That was the reason she had walked away 12 years ago. Not because she wasn't strong enough, but because she hadn't been strong enough to forget. And now, sitting in the dark simulator, the ghosts pressed closer than ever. One evening, Carter lingered at the door after training. He watched her longer than he should have, his face pale in the glow of the screens. "You don't sleep, do you?" he asked quietly. Sarah stiffened. "Go get rest." But he didn't move. "You carry it with you. I can see it, the weight." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp. "Don't mistake silence for weakness." He swallowed, but he didn't back down. "I was." Their eyes held for a moment too long before she looked away. "Go," she said again, softer this time. He obeyed, but his words stayed with her long into the night. The world outside the base kept buzzing. News anchors debated her. Commentators dissected her. Strangers argued online about what she meant for women in the military, for veterans, for the myth of Top Gun. But Sarah didn't listen. Her world had narrowed again, to Carter, to the simulator, to the ghost she couldn't shake. And to the sky, always the sky. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't finished. The SOS that had pulled her back hadn't been an ending. It had only been the beginning. Why was he pushing himself so hard? That was the thought that kept nagging at Sarah as she watched Carter stumble out of the simulator again, drenched in sweat, his knuckles white from gripping the stick too tight. He wasn't just training, he was punishing himself. Every correction she barked, he obeyed. Every mistake he repeated until his hands shook. He didn't care how exhausted he was, how raw his voice sounded, how hollow his eyes grew. Sarah saw it clearly because she'd lived it once. This wasn't about learning to fly. It was about burying fear with repetition, about drowning the voice that whispered you're not enough by proving, again and again, that maybe you were. She knew that voice too well. The simulator bay was empty now, just the two of them. Carter slumped against the console, his breath shallow. "That's enough for today," she said finally. "No," he panted, shaking his head. "Reset, I've got it this time." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You're running on fumes, you'll just make more mistakes." He looked up at her then, his eyes bloodshot but blazing. "Then you'll fix them. You'll tell me what I did wrong, and I'll do it again until it's right." Her stomach twisted. For a moment she saw herself at his age, furious, desperate, clawing for approval from instructors who never thought she belonged. She remembered the long nights, the raw throats, the hands trembling from exhaustion but refusing to quit. And she remembered what it had cost her. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think this is about perfection. It is. It's about survival. And survival isn't clean, it isn't flawless, it's messy, it's brutal. And sometimes," her throat tightened, "sometimes it isn't enough." Carter's eyes searched hers. He wanted to argue, but something in her voice stopped him. He nodded, slow, reluctant. Sarah reached over and shut down the simulator. The screens dimmed, the glow fading from her face. "Go get some sleep," she said. This time he didn't fight her. That night Sarah couldn't sleep either. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, the keychain heavy in her hand. The tiny jet pressed into her palm, its edges worn smooth by years of silence. Her mind replayed the boy's face in the cockpit, his voice breaking over the radio, begging for control. It was Carter she saw anymore. It was another face, another voice. 12 years ago. Her wingman. The day she hadn't been able to save him. The memory slammed into her chest, so hard she sat up gasping, her hand clutching the keychain like it was the only anchor she had. The barracks was quiet, but inside her, the ghosts were screaming. The next morning, Carter was waiting for her outside the simulator. His uniform was wrinkled, his face pale, but his jaw was set. "I want to know," he said before she even opened her mouth. Sarah frowned. "Know what?" "Why you left." The words hit harder than any accusation. Her spine stiffened. "That's none of your concern." "It is," he pressed. "Because you're teaching me. Because every time I look at you, I see the weight you're carrying. And if I'm supposed to follow you, I need to understand what it cost you." Sarah's breath caught. For a long moment, she said nothing. She wanted to shut him down, to turn on her heel and walk away. But his eyes held hers, steady, unflinching. And against her will, the words came. "I lost someone," she said quietly, 12 years ago. A man I trusted, a man I flew with. And when the moment came when his jet failed, I couldn't bring him home." Her voice cracked, just barely, but enough. Carter's face softened, the fire in his eyes dimming. "It wasn't your fault." Sarah shook her head. "It doesn't matter, he didn't make it, and I did. And every day after I asked myself why." The silence between them grew heavy. Finally Carter spoke. "Then yesterday you answered it." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but belief was harder than flying through fire. "Get in the simulator," she said instead. Training grew harsher. Sarah's command snapped sharper, her patience thinner. She drove Carter to his limits, forcing him to correct every mistake, to find precision in chaos, to master the art of calm in the storm. But she wasn't just teaching him. She was teaching herself again. Every maneuver she ordered, she mirrored in her mind. Every command was a reminder, every correction a reckoning. And slowly, something inside her began to shift. Not healing, not forgiveness, but control. The thing she thought she had lost forever. Meanwhile, whispers outside the simulator grew louder. Officers argued in closed rooms. Some wanted her reinstated. Others said she was a liability, a relic. The press hounded the gates, desperate for interviews, for photos, for scraps of the woman they now called Valkyrie Reborn. And in the shadows, rumors stirred of a new threat, a foreign unit testing American defenses, flying patterns too close to the coast, daring someone to respond. The commander didn't say it outright, but Sarah felt it in the air. This wasn't just about Carter anymore. It was about what was coming, and whether she could face it. One night after another grueling session, Carter collapsed onto the simulator's floor, his chest heaving. Sarah crouched beside him, her face unreadable. "You did better," she admitted softly. He gave a weak smile. "You almost sound proud." She looked at him for a long moment, then away. "Don't mistake progress for victory. Out there, victory isn't clean, it's survival. And survival," she trailed off, her throat tight, "sometimes survival is just luck." Carter pushed himself up on his elbows, his eyes burning. "Then I'll take luck, if it means living, if it means bringing my wingman home." The words struck her like lightning. Her chest ached, her hand tightening around the keychain in her pocket. For the first time in years, she let herself meet someone's eyes fully. Then don't fly for yourself, she said, her voice low, steady. Fly for them, always for them. Carter nodded, his expression fierce. And in that moment, Sarah realized she wasn't just training a boy. She was training her replacement. Someone who could carry what she couldn't anymore. The next morning, alarms blared across the base. Pilots scrambled, officers shouted, radios crackled with urgency. Sarah and Carter burst into the control room to find chaos unfolding on the screens. Unidentified aircraft skimming the coast, aggressive maneuvers, probing, testing. The commander's face was stone. This isn't a drill. Carter's eyes shot to Sarah, wide, trembling. For her, the choice was immediate, instinctual. 12 years of silence had ended. The sky was calling again. Why was the alarm different this time? Sarah had heard countless drills, countless sirens in her years of service, but this wasn't the blunt routine of practice. This one carried sharpness, urgency, the sound of something real. By the time she and Carter reached the control room, the energy in the air was jagged. Screens flickered with radar blips. Red lines crawled across digital maps of the coastline. Officers spoke over one another, their voices clipped, almost frantic. Unidentified aircraft 12 miles out, low altitude. They're pushing into restricted airspace. Confirmed signatures, these aren't ours. The commander stood in the center of it all, his hands gripping the edge of a console. His jaw was locked, his eyes on the screens. He didn't look at Sarah until she stopped beside him. This isn't a drill, he said quietly, confirming what she already knew. Her heart thudded once hard. Carter hovered a step behind her, pale but steady. Scramble the ready squadron, the commander ordered. Already on it, an officer replied. But then another voice broke through, sharp and panicked. 2 of our birds are grounded maintenance. We've only got 3 in the air. The room fell silent for a beat too long. Everyone knew it. 3 against however many were out there wasn't balance. It was provocation. The commander finally turned to Sarah. His eyes held no mockery now, no hesitation, only gravity. You know what I'm asking. Sarah's throat tightened. She hadn't strapped into a jet since the airshow rescue. That had been instinct, reaction, a moment pulled from fire. This would be deliberate. This would be combat readiness. Behind her, Carter shifted, his voice low but firm. If she goes, I go. The commander hesitated, his eyes narrowing at the boy. But Sarah cut in first, her voice sharp. No, he's not ready. Carter bristled. You don't decide that. Her eyes snapped to his. You'll listen to me if you want to live. This isn't the simulator. This isn't a controlled descent. This is threat. And threat doesn't forgive mistakes. The room tensed. Officers glanced between them, sensing the current. Carter's jaw worked. His hands balled into fists, but he said nothing more. Sarah turned back to the commander. Her voice was steady now. Open the hangar. The walk down the hangar floor felt like a march through memory. Mechanics scrambled, loading gear, running checks. Pilots strapped helmets, voices sharp over radios. As Sarah approached the Raptor waiting for her, conversations faltered. Eyes followed her. Some held doubt, some awe, some raw disbelief. But no one spoke against her this time. She climbed the ladder, movement smooth, practiced. She slid into the cockpit and strapped in, her hands brushing switches like old friends. The canopy lowered, the roar of the world dimmed. She was alone again. For a heartbeat, her chest constricted. The keychain pressed against her thigh inside her pocket. She whispered under her breath, a name only she knew. Then she powered up. The HUD blazed awake. Systems checked green across the board. Her voice cut through the radio, calm, clipped. Tower, Valkyrie is online. A pause, then the commander's voice steady. Godspeed. The engines roared, fire peeling across the runway. The Raptor launched forward, then upward, slicing into the night sky. Darkness swallowed her quickly. The coastal lights fell away beneath, replaced by endless black ocean. Clouds parted above, streaks of silver moonlight cutting through. Her radar lit with blips, unidentified aircraft moving low and slow, testing boundaries. They hadn't crossed fully into U.S. airspace yet, but they were close, too close. Her breathing slowed, every nerve in her body sharpened. This wasn't the air show. This wasn't teaching Carter. This was the world she had buried colliding with the present. Her voice stayed calm. "This is Valkyrie. I have visual on targets." On the ground, chatter erupted. Officers scrambled to confirm, to monitor. The commander's voice cut through steady, though Sarah could hear the steel beneath. "Hold shadow until we identify. Do not engage unless fired upon." Sarah locked eyes on the silhouettes ahead, sleek, foreign, powerful. They flew with a confidence that wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. She eased closer, her jet a ghost in the night. Back at the base, Carter stood glued to a monitor, headset clamped tight. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the glowing radar, the tiny speck labeled Valkyrie. His chest burned with frustration and awe. "She should have let me go," he muttered. The commander shot him a look. "You'd be dead already. Watch and learn." Carter bit back a retort, his jaw tight. But inside, he knew the commander was right. Still, it didn't make the weight in his chest lighter. In the sky, Sarah's jet shadowed the intruders. Her voice came low over comms. "3 birds, foreign signatures. Formation is deliberate." "Copy," the commander replied. Her eyes narrowed as she studied them. Their wings cut sharp angles against moonlight, their engines humming steady. They weren't here by accident. They were testing, watching, provoking. One of the aircraft peeled slightly, tilting in her direction. "A message." Sarah's hand hovered near the throttle. She didn't move, didn't blink. The 2 jets locked eyes across darkness, invisible but undeniable. The past whispered in her ears again. The screams, the fire, the helpless spin of a wingman she couldn't save. Her chest tightened, but her hands didn't shake. She matched the tilt, steady, calm. The foreign jet held the stare for a long moment before sliding back into formation. Testing complete. They banked together, pulling away, retreating into the black horizon. Sarah exhaled slowly, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Targets disengaging," she reported. On the ground, the room erupted in noise. Relief, chatter, reports being logged. But Carter leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes wide. "She didn't fire a shot," he whispered. The commander's eyes stayed locked on the screen. "She didn't need to." Sarah guided the Raptor back to base, her landing clean, precise. The canopy hissed open. The night air hit her face, cool and heavy. Mechanics and officers surrounded the jet instantly, but no one spoke first. They just watched her climb down, her stride calm, her face unreadable. Carter broke through the crowd, unable to hold back. "Why didn't you engage? You could have." She cut him off with a sharp look. "You don't fire unless you have to. Sometimes the strongest message isn't in the trigger, it's in the restraint." He swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly, but his eyes still burned with questions. The commander stepped forward, his voice low. "You did what was needed, nothing more, nothing less." Sarah nodded once. But inside, she knew this wasn't over. Later that night, alone in the barracks, she sat with the keychain in her hand, her thumb tracing its edges. Her mind replayed the stare across the sky, the silent communication between enemies who hadn't spoken a word. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker. And she could feel it deep in her bones. The world was changing. And no matter how much she had wanted to stay hidden, it was pulling her back. The ghosts she carried weren't done with her yet. Outside, the coastal wind howled across the empty runway. The jets slept in their hangars, shadows stretched long under the moon. But above, the sky remained endless, indifferent, waiting. Waiting for the next call. Waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be enough. Why did the ghosts always wait until nightfall? Sarah sat alone in the simulator room, the lights dimmed, the screens dark. Everyone else had gone, Carter finally asleep in the barracks, the hangar doors locked. Yet she stayed, her hand resting lightly on the stick, her reflection faint in the black glass of the monitor. She didn't have to close her eyes to see it. The memory was always waiting. 12 years ago, a mission over foreign waters. 2 raptors, hers and his. Call signs, Valkyrie and Ghost. He had been her partner, her anchor, the one who cracked jokes in the pre-flight briefings and carried silence with dignity in the sky. Until the day his jet faltered. Until the day his voice, panicked and breaking, filled her headset. Until the day she told him to pull up, stabilize, breathe. Commands she had given Carter just days ago. And still Ghost had gone down. She remembered the flames against black water, the scream of metal, the silence afterward. That was why she had left. Not because she couldn't fly, but because she couldn't forget the sound of his silence. Now 12 years later, she was hearing Carter's voice overlap with Ghost's, one panicked, one gone. And she wondered if the sky had brought her back not to save Carter, but to finally face what she had buried. The next morning, Carter was waiting for her outside the simulator, his face pale, his jaw set. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly. Sarah froze. "Tell you what?" "I heard the others talking, the mission, the one you walked away from, you lost your wingman." Her chest tightened. Carter stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "That's why you push me so hard, because you think if I fail, I'll end up like him." Sarah's eyes flicked to his, sharp. "If you fail, you will end up like him." The words cut harsher than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Carter flinched, but he didn't look away. "Then teach me harder, push me until I can't fail." Something in his tone, desperate, determined, broken, echoed her own voice from 12 years ago. She swallowed hard, her hand tightening around the keychain in her pocket. "Get in the simulator," she said. The days grew relentless. Sarah drove Carter until his hands blistered, until sweat soaked his collar, until his voice cracked from shouting callouts. Every mistake was dissected, every hesitation corrected. She gave no comfort, no softness. But when he began to break, she gave him one truth, over and over. "Flying isn't about you. It's about the one beside you, the one counting on you to bring them home." He repeated it like a prayer, until it became muscle memory, stitched into every maneuver, every breath. But the more he grew, the more Sarah felt her own edges fraying. Because every time he steadied, every time he corrected, every time he met her gaze with that fierce determination, she saw Ghost. And the weight of what she hadn't saved pressed harder. Outside the simulator, the world kept circling. News anchors still debated her. Some praised her restraint in the sky, calling it a lesson in control. Others accused her of weakness, saying she should have fired, sent a message of strength. Sarah ignored the noise, but the commander didn't. One evening, he found her alone on the runway, the sea breeze cold against her face. "They won't let this go," he said. "I don't care what they think," she replied. "It's not about them, it's about what's coming." Sarah turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "You mean the foreign jets?" He nodded. "They weren't just testing us, they were testing you. Word of Valkyrie is out now, and they wanted to see if the legend was real." Her chest tightened. "Was it?" she asked quietly. The commander held her gaze. "You tell me." Carter grew restless. One night after training, he cornered her outside the simulator, his face pale, his eyes burning. "I need to fly," he said. "You already do." "No, really fly out there in the sky, not just in the box." Sarah shook her head. "You're not ready." His voice cracked, raw. "When will I be ready? After I've memorized every mistake I could ever make, after I've trained until my body breaks. What if I never get the chance?" Her heart clenched. She saw herself again, young, desperate, begging instructors to let her prove herself. She took a breath, her voice softer than usual. When you stop asking for it, when you start carrying it, that's when you'll be ready. He stared at her, confusion flickering across his face. But he didn't argue. Not yet. The next week the coastal patrols intensified. Foreign signatures appeared again, edging closer, lingering longer. This time they didn't just test, they taunted. Sarah flew once more, shadowing, watching, steady. Each time Carter stood in the control room, fists clenched, eyes locked on the radar, aching to be there. And each time Sarah returned silent, the weight in her chest heavier. Because she knew it was building towards something. Not just a test, not just a taunt. Something bigger. Something coming. One night she found Carter waiting for her outside the barracks, his face pale in the moonlight. "Why did you really leave?" he asked again. She hesitated. "I told you." "No," he said firmly. "You told me what happened, not why." Her throat closed. For a long moment she said nothing. The sea wind whipped against them, carrying salt and silence. Finally she spoke, her voice low. "Because I couldn't forgive myself. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw him go down. Because no matter how many times they told me it wasn't my fault, I knew I was there and he was." Carter's eyes softened, and now. She swallowed, her hand tightening around the keychain in her pocket. "Now I see you, and I don't know if that's a second chance or a second punishment." The silence between them grew heavy, charged. Carter stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then make it a second chance." Her eyes flicked to his, burning. For a moment she wanted to believe him. But belief was harder than flying through fire. The alarms came again, piercing the night. Sarah and Carter ran side by side toward the control room, hearts pounding. This time the screens showed more than shadows. Multiple foreign aircraft, aggressive patterns, moving fast. The commander's face was stone. "This isn't a test, this is contact." Carter's breath caught, his eyes shot to Sarah's. And for her the ghosts rose again. The past colliding with the present. The sky calling louder than ever. And she knew, this time Carter would not be left behind. Why did it feel the same as 12 years ago? The alarms, the shouting officers, the radar lit in red. Sarah stood in the control room, her chest tight, her hand closed around the keychain in her pocket. She didn't need the screens to tell her what was happening. The storm she had feared was here. Foreign aircraft, not just 3 this time. Twice that, moving fast, deliberate, crossing lines that weren't supposed to be crossed. The commander's voice cut sharp through the noise. "We need every bird in the air, now." Pilots scrambled, voices colliding, boots pounding down corridors. Sarah's eyes met the commander's. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She already knew. Beside her, Carter's breath hitched. His face was pale, his hands trembling, but his eyes burned. "Don't say it," Sarah whispered. He looked at her anyway. "I'm going up." Her throat closed. "You're not ready." His jaw tightened. "I've been ready since the moment you saved me." She wanted to argue, to forbid, to lock him in the simulator until his body broke. But she saw it in his eyes, the same fire she had carried once, the same fire Ghost had carried before the end. And she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. If she kept him grounded, he would carry resentment forever. If she let him fly, he might carry scars instead. But scars at least meant survival. She swallowed hard. "Then we go together." The hangar was chaos. Mechanics rushed, engines roared, helmets snapped into place. Pilots strapped in with the quiet desperation of people who knew this wasn't a drill. Sarah climbed her ladder, Carter on the jet beside her. Their eyes met once through the glass canopies before the helmets lowered, sealing them in silence. The HUD blazed to life. Her hands moved without thought, muscle memory taking command. Switches flipped. Systems checked green. Her voice came over comms, calm, clipped. Valkyrie online. A pause, then Carter's voice shaky but firm. Ghost 2 online. The call sign hit her chest like a blow. She wanted to tell him to change it, to never speak that name again. But something inside her broke instead, something that let the pain breathe for the first time in 12 years. Ghost 2. Not to replace, to continue. The runway cleared. The engine screamed. Their Raptors surged forward, fire and steel tearing across asphalt before slicing into the night. The sky swallowed them whole. The ocean below was endless black. Ahead, red blips lit the radar, foreign birds closing fast, their formation tight, aggressive. Sarah's voice stayed calm. Lock in formation, shadow me. Copy, Carter breathed. They climbed higher, slicing through thin clouds, the moon painting silver streaks across their wings. The enemy jets broke formation, spreading wide. The sky became a chessboard, every move a threat, every tilt a test. Maintain distance, Sarah ordered. But one broke toward Carter, fast and sharp. On me, she snapped. Carter banked hard, his breathing ragged, the enemy jet shadowing his every move. For a moment, panic spiked in his voice. I can't shake him. Yes, you can, Sarah cut in. Her tone carried steel, the same steel she had once failed to find 12 years ago. Breathe, focus, fly for me, fly for the one beside you. Silence, then his voice steadier, copy. He pulled up sharp. The enemy overshot, skimming dangerously close before peeling wide. Carter corrected, breath ragged but holding. Sarah's chest tightened. He had done it. But the sky wasn't done with them yet. The fight unfolded in flashes. Enemy jets darting in and out, testing angles, firing bursts of warning shots that lit the darkness in sudden flares. Sarah wove through them with precision, Carter trailing her shadow, learning in real time what the simulator could never teach. Her own HUD screamed warnings, lock-ons flashing red, alarms wailing. But her hands didn't falter. Her voice didn't shake. Every command she gave, Carter echoed. Every maneuver she led, he matched. For the first time, she wasn't just saving him. He was flying with her. One jet broke formation again, targeting Carter. Sarah dove between them, her Raptor slicing the sky, forcing the enemy wide. Alarms shrieked. Her wing brushed turbulence so hard her vision blurred, but she held. Carter's voice cracked. You should have let me take it. Quiet, she snapped. I don't leave my wingman. The words hung heavy, sharper than any missile. 12 years ago she had, not by choice, not by failure, but by fate. Not tonight. Not again. The standoff stretched until the foreign jets finally pulled back, their message sent, their presence undeniable. One by one, they vanished into the horizon, retreating into the dark ocean night. Sarah and Carter circled, steadying breathing, their engines howling against silence. Her voice came low, "Stay with me, we're going home." Carter's reply was quiet but certain, "Copy, Valkyrie." The landing was clean. Their jets screeched against asphalt, smoke curling from wheels. Emergency crews raced forward, but this time no flames followed. The canopies hissed open. Sarah pulled her helmet free, sweat running down her temples, her breath slow and heavy. Carter climbed out beside her, his hands trembling, his face pale but alive. When their boots hit the ground, the crowd was already gathering. Pilots, mechanics, officers, soldiers, hundreds of eyes watching in silence. Sarah didn't look at them, she looked at Carter. He looked back at her, wide-eyed, shaken but steady. And in that moment she saw it, Ghost's reflection, not as a shadow of what she lost, but as proof of what lived on. Later, when the chaos calmed, Sarah stood alone at the runway's edge. The coastal wind whipped against her hoodie, the faint roar of jets echoing from somewhere far above. She pulled the keychain from her pocket, turning the tiny jet in her hand. Its edges were smooth now, worn from years of silence. Her eyes lifted to the sky, the vast, indifferent sky that had taken so much and given back so little. And she whispered, not for anyone else to hear but for herself. "I didn't leave you behind, not anymore." The ghosts were quieter now, not gone, never gone, but quieter. Behind her, Carter's footsteps approached. He stopped at her side, silent, his eyes also on the sky. Neither spoke, they didn't need to. The truth was in the silence, in the shared weight of what they had carried and survived. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And that night the sky knew their names, both of them.